was a very interesting back and forth, interestingly enough, at a local church here where Kevin O'Connell gave a speech within the last few days. And at the end of it, they had a Q&A session with the congregation, at which point someone went up and grabbed the microphone and asked a question about the evals of JJ against Drake Maye.
Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, celebrating an annual tradition like no other, the 2024 NFL Mock Draft. I think we're on year, 4 or 5 of this now. With the same crew, we are presented by Underdog Fantasy. So if you go to Underdog Fantasy right now, you can get yourself a match deposit of up to $100. You hit the link down in the description. Make it even easier on yourself because you don't have to put in code Mayo. You'll just have code Mayo embedded in that link. So go do that for me, all right? You can smash the like to the episode, sub to Mayo Media Network, sub to the audio podcast, rate and review, and subscribe to the free newsletter where you can just get a running list of this entire mock draft. You don't want to listen to us go through the entire thing. You just want to see who the picks were. The free newsletter will have that in it. So go subscribe right now, Mayo Media Substack. Enough of me, because you are not here today to listen to me. I am just the arbiter of decisions that are, let's say, I'm like the vice president. I don't really do much unless a tie vote needs to come in. Then I will cast a tie vote based on the arguments that have been made. Thor Nystrom, Ray Garvin, joining me on the line like they do every single year. I don't know anything, really, about draft stuff. But you guys have been doing this for 4 months now. So every year I need the refresher right before the draft so I can talk to my friends. Like, oh, Pat, you work in football. Tell me about the draft. Like, I don't know anything about the draft. Until I talk to you guys, then I can just parrot what you guys say to my friends, Ray. And, that seems to work out pretty well for me.
I'm excited. I mean, you said it. This is an annual staple, Pat. I am running on fumes. Spent a week in Hawaii. And I wasn't missing the show. I was not missing the opportunity to speak with Thor Nystrom, to go through all 32 teams and give a first-round pick. And the fact that I get to talk to Pat Mayo as well on his show, that's an added bonus. I'm here. I'm excited. This is going to be a great class, and I'm excited for this week.
Thor, we've grown this over the years. This is now a lot of fun for people to tune into.
Yeah, I was thinking we started this even before COVID, so it's been going back a while, and now I will get messages from people starting at the beginning of April. When is the Mayo Mock Draft show going to happen this year? Well, folks, it's coming now because we are recording it now. It is draft week. We are getting there. I'm super stoked to do it. Any chance I get to hang out with you and talk to Ray Garvin about draft prospects, I'm going to take it, and it's become a cool tradition as well.
How much, Thor, has this really grown over the years? Like when we did this in 2019, like it was big. Like mock drafting was obviously big. Basically since the invention of the internet, mock drafting has been big. But it feels like there's a whole NFL draft industry now where there wasn't, I would say it was probably like 25% as big 5 years ago.
The fans have gotten a lot more informed, and a part of that is because they've been weaponized with all this data, which helps out a lot as well. And then, of course, the new media as well. It's not just television, or when, I was talking about this on Twitter last week. When I was a kid, obsessed with the NFL draft, I watched the NFL draft. The only place that I could get a big board and usually information about the draft, this is back in, I don't want to date myself, this is back in dial tone internet days in Brainerd, Minnesota, up north there, was in the back of draft magazines that I would get during spring break in the airport Hudson, and they would only be 50 deep. You didn't have a ton of information at that point, so you were relying on Mel Kiper for most of what you knew about the draft. At this point, you have all these different awesome guys out there that get really deep in the weeds on this stuff. You have PFF data, you have data from all these other different companies where the charting data and individuals that do charting on different positions. So the average fan is really weaponized heading into the draft with their own takes on all these different guys, and it makes it a much more interactive experience.
Ray, I spoke about this a little bit on my Sunday show with Brian Hoopers, that it's been good and bad, because I feel like Twitter, no matter what social platform that you use, there are very sharp people on there who would have never previously had a voice into this. I mean, I think both of you guys are kind of prime examples of this. You've used that to build up an audience, to do informed takes, great research, good takes, but at the same time, I feel like NFL draft season is now full of like 90% of people who have no fucking clue what they're talking about.
Listen, I'm glad you kicked it to me for this one, because it's something as I sat away for the week and I watched, I always just say this: be mindful of the content you consume. Not everybody has the same objective when we go to and talk about these prospects. And I just want to say this is something that Thor and I both, and I will speak for him, our process didn't start 4 months ago. I mean, we have been watching and following these guys, hell, since they matriculated from high school to the collegiate game. We love college football, and I think that's where the love and the passion and the desire and just the conviction for the things that Thor and I talk about, amongst other people across the space. But it doesn't just start when the NFL season is over. We have been following and tracking and watching these guys for years on end, and this is the icing on the cake. So to your point, Pat, you just have to be mindful because not everybody has the same goal and objective when they're talking about these players and these prospects. And for people like Thor and I mean, yes, we've got personal conviction on guys, but we want to deliver advice and information from things that have actually taken place, not hearsay, not the BS stuff that you see at this point in the process. So yes, you have to be mindful of the content you consume. But I feel very confident in saying that any take that Thor Nystrom or Ray Garvin spews, spits, or talks about, we can back it. We will stand on business when it comes to those evaluations of those players.
Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about the mock draft. Pick number 1, the Chicago Bears via the Carolina Panthers, and what is looking like a really terrible trade. At this point, Ray, you can actually lead. I always feel like we kind of go back and forth with this. You can lead this year off. Pick number 1. Will you deviate from what is actually going to happen? And I should probably actually, you know what? Let me lay out no trades in this draft, and it is what you think the teams are going to do. Not what you guys want to do, what you think the teams are going to do. Because I always forget to say that, and then people are like, but and I'm like, I don't fucking care. Just like, this is what we're doing every single year. Just because you don't fucking listen is not my problem. Ray, your pick.
Yes, as the GM of the Chicago Bears, I do believe that they will be selecting one Caleb Williams, quarterback out of USC. This is a no-brainer selection. All the moves that they've made throughout the offseason have led us to this point. I don't want to belabor this, but I will say Caleb Williams is incredible. He is an incredible talent, and we'll talk about some other quarterback prospects later throughout this mock, and they are good quarterback prospects as well, and I think that they are going to be very good in the NFL, but make no mistake about it, I don't give a damn what color he paints his nails. I cried to my mom 2 weeks ago, and I still feel like a man. Caleb Williams on the Chicago Bears with what they're building, and I'll just say this, I have enjoyed watching Ryan Poles from a distance. They did everything that they could have last year to help make Justin Fields be successful by acquiring DJ Moore, drafting Darnell Wright, and they've doubled down again, bringing in Keenan Allen, upgrading their offensive line, bringing in another tight end in Gerald Everett. The selection will be Caleb Williams. This should be little intrigue to this pick. Caleb Williams is a Bear.
Thor, I guess, I mean, I know you're going to agree with Caleb Williams on this. I'm looking at your mock draft on Fantasy Pros right now. Caleb Williams, number 1. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Why were Bear fans so mad about trading Justin Fields and getting Caleb Williams? Doesn't this feel like the upgrade of the century?
Yeah, on the surface for sure. I think there's, I come to you from Minnesota, and there was fans here that were upset that Cousins leaves. There's people when they leave relationships, even if they're not the healthiest, that it takes them a while to get over that. And I think that that's what that is. But I think they're going to get over it pretty quick when the new one moves into town and they see Caleb Williams working with that receiving core that Ray was just talking about, and that offensive line that they have built up, and the talent that Caleb Williams has. There's only one sort of minor concern I have about his game, but the athleticism is there. The arm talent is there. And my favorite thing about him, there is this touch of genius, artistic creativity to the way he plays. Certainly can go both ways. We talked about that a little bit when he gets outside the pocket. And this past season, the offensive line was not very good at USC. And so his creativity, leaning game, that bent to it. Sometimes this past season, when he was under duress all the time, he could scramble himself into nowhere. I think that's maybe an over nitpick on him, though. The one thing he has to prove in the NFL, it's the throwing, the timing concepts over the middle, the anticipatory things. Just because those weren't in the Lincoln Riley offense, it was either the screen pass or it was Caleb create, and the creativity is where you see that genius and you see all the flash plays. But I thought Caleb Williams made a good point on the recent interview that he did on that Ryan Clark show, where he said, I do whatever is asked of me and whatever it takes to win the game on the field. And if you actually look at the numbers and everything like that, he was winning from the pocket or doing stuff from within the pocket effectively. It's just, we sort of focus on some of that other stuff. Can he be taught that the timing concepts thrown over the middle to force the defense to respect that aspect of his game? That's really the only slight thing here. I think that should be fine. The rest of it is aces.
All right. Caleb Williams to the Chicago Bears, the Washington Commandos up on the clock. Now, this is where it finally gets a little bit interesting. So, Thor, will lead off with you on this one. Who is Washington going to take at number 2?
Yeah, you said it there, Mayo. The first one is the free spot on the bingo card, and then we start having fun from down there. Every pick after that, because we don't know, even sitting out here, moving in on 5 days, 4 days within the NFL draft, we don't know who is going to go number 2. Washington has done. We know they're going to take a quarterback. Everybody knows they're going to take a quarterback, but they have done a very good job this process, not letting any information whatsoever leak out as to their intention beyond that. And you can see this in the betting market. Drake Maye began the process as the prohibitive favorite for this. As of like a week ago, Jayden Daniels was a 3-1 favorite. Then there was the thing where Washington brought in 4 of the top quarterbacks for visits on the exact same day. Jayden Daniels' agent publicly did not seem to appreciate that. The betting market reacted to this by recorrecting the odds board there. It was probably overstating it at Jayden Daniels at 3-1 favorite, seeing as though there's no other information out there. We're just sort of reading tea leaves and doing best fit based on what we know about Cliff Kingsbury and the prerogative of some of those decision makers there. Even though that board has gone that way, I am still going to give Jayden Daniels to Washington here. I think he is a better fit for what Cliff Kingsbury traditionally looks for in his quarterbacks than Drake Maye. The wild card for me is not Drake Maye for this slot. It is actually J.J. McCarthy, one that has been sort of in the peripheries, and NFL executives, when they get pulled about this, J.J. McCarthy's name comes up for the number 2 slot a lot, very, very often in this stuff, and it has for the last month. But I'm still going to go with Jayden Daniels, a guy who is the number 2 guy on my board and is a very good fit for what Cliff traditionally looks for. Like I said, 6 of the last 9 quarterbacks that have been starting quarterbacks for Cliff Kingsbury. This goes back to his time as an offensive coordinator at Houston, covers his time at Texas Tech. And then last year when he turned down more money and bigger jobs so that he could coach Caleb Williams at USC, 6 of those last 9 quarterbacks were out of structure, off platform, creativity, extend the play type quarterbacks. The 3 that weren't, he more or less got stuck with and got him out as quick as he could. I think that Jayden Daniels, like I said, fits that better than Drake Maye, and then J.J. McCarthy is sort of your dark horse for that. But we're going with Jayden Daniels in the number 2 slot.
Would you agree, Ray, that they will go with Jayden Daniels at number 2, or do you think it's going to be Maye or even J.J.? Can you explain this J.J. McCarthy thing to me? Like, as someone who watches from the outside, I never in a million years thought he was going to be number 2.
I think that's a fair point. A lot of people didn't, to be honest. You go back to February, and the talk was maybe he sneaks into the late first. Everybody knew he had the tools and the traits, but it wasn't until some of that information started to leak. And to Thor's point, you've got Adam Peters, who served as the assistant GM in San Francisco, who would frequently talk about their love and their passion and their belief in Brock Purdy, who has played as one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL despite the team over the past 18 games or 20 plus games when he took over as a starter at the end of last season. But I do agree with Thor. I think that this city, and I've got family in the DMV area, y'all, the field that the Commanders, the Washington football team played in is atrocious. They've already got approvals for a new stadium in the Virginia area. This is a move that this city, that fan base, they want electricity. And the player that brings that level of electricity is Jayden Daniels. And I know there are concerns to his game. I don't like seeing quarterbacks get sacked 1,000,000 times. And that's one of the things that we're going to have to see Jayden Daniels improve upon. But when you're talking about electricity, a division in which, you need to spark that fan base, I do believe that Jayden Daniels is going to be the selection. And to Thor's point, I would actually put my money, if it wasn't Jayden Daniels, I would lean J.J. McCarthy. The traits are there, Pat. And I understand. And let me say this. I have not had the outward profession of love for J.J. McCarthy as Thor Nystrom has, but you can check the receipts. This kid was a top prospect coming out of high school, going into Michigan, and you see everything. I mean, hell, had he run the 40-yard dash, Pat, I think people would be talking about him as the number 2. Just that alone, had he just run the 40 and put some time on wax, people would be talking about him as the potential number 2 quarterback. Does everything right, leader, winner, tools, traits. That's a mini case for J.J. McCarthy. But to answer the direct question, yes, I do believe that the Washington Commandos will select Jayden Daniels out of LSU.
All right, so you're not giving. I like that you're not putting the decision making on me for this one because I have no idea who to choose in these spots. So Williams, Daniels, New England on the clock, number 3. Ray, why is it that J.J. McCarthy might go 2 to Washington, but we're not hearing that about New England?
Yeah, I think it's the uncertainty of everything that's going on in New England right now. We have not seen this team operate in a different form or fashion in almost 2 decades under Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. And I know we had a couple of years with Mac Jones in there, but it just feels like with Alex Van Pelt, Gerard Mayo, and sort of the rumors that you're hearing coming out of New England, they want to do things a little bit differently and getting away from that old Patriot way. It just seems like it just seems like McCarthy may be too similar to what they've had in the past. Who knows? But I do think he should be on the cards for New England at 3. But at this point, I've said for a long time that I wasn't sold that New England would take a quarterback here, especially with Marvin Harrison, in my opinion, the best player in this draft on the board. But I do think in this division, when you've got to go up against Josh Allen, you've got in Miami that you have to deal with, and it looks like Aaron Rodgers is back, and the Jets are probably most assuredly going to go all in this year and next year for Aaron Rodgers, the decline of his career. I think the Patriots are going to look for a quarterback. You cannot play those games with Jacoby Brissett and Bailey Zappi as your only 2 signal callers in that offense right now. Drake Maye, for me, would be the selection here. This is where I think the New England Patriots are going to go. Seems like they would prefer Jayden Daniels, but I don't think Jayden is going to be there. I would love to hear Thor push back on this one and say they're not taking a quarterback, but I just believe that in this division, when you've got to deal with the AFC East, and hell, we're starting to see it now in the NFL. If you ain't got a quarterback, I don't give a damn who you got at wide receiver. You don't have a chance in hell to compete. So they've got to find who that player is. And I do think Drake Maye is just as talented as they come. A little bit of prospect fatigue with Drake Maye, and there are some warts to his game. But you talk about the physical tools. He looks the part. When you look at all in this class, this is the one that looks like a franchise prototypical signal caller at damn near 6'5", 230 pounds. Drake Maye can move. He's athletic. He comes from a family with an athletic background. I think Drake Maye is going to be a stud, whether it's in New England, Minnesota, or elsewhere.
Thor, would you push back that the Patriots don't take a quarterback here?
Well, there's 2 things that I believe about the Patriots in this slot before I get to my pick. Number 1 is I do agree with Ray that I believe Jayden Daniels is above Drake and JJ on their board. So if he got here, I think that's the pick. The question, of course, becomes JJ against Drake, which I will get back to in a second. The second point I wanted to make is, of course, coming to you live from Minneapolis, the talk around town has been the trade up and the Vikings attempting to trade up this entire process. And will they get to the finish line? Most of the smoke has been around this New England slot. And there was a very interesting back and forth, interestingly enough, at a local church here where Kevin O'Connell gave a speech within the last few days. And at the end of it, they had a Q&A session with the congregation, at which point someone went up and grabbed the microphone and asked a question about the evals of JJ against Drake Maye, which led to a very interesting back and forth at the very end about the trade-up possibility. And could you use your connections with Robert Kraft? Of course, Kevin O'Connell, when he came out of San Diego State, briefly played for the New England Patriots. He still has a very good relationship with a lot of people there. And O'Connell he knows how to play a room, but was joking around and said, yeah, I just recently sent Robert Kraft a nice bouquet of flowers. But tracking this sort of conspiratorially, which of course is my prerogative, both of my job and just being obsessed with this stuff, a lot of smoke around those 2 teams right now. So we'll see if they end up getting there. Obviously, if the Vikings, though, traded up, they would be taking a quarterback here as well. All that being said, and all those things up in the air, I'm going to go with Drake Maye in a split decision. I do think if New England is on the clock, JJ is very, very much in play. However, if the Vikings trade up, of course, the Vikings quarterback coach, Josh McCown, coached Drake Maye in high school. So he is obviously during this entire process been sort of leading the charge for that. He was the one that they sent down as the representative at Drake Maye's pro day. And Drake Maye, along with JJ McCarthy, are, in my opinion, the two best fits in this class for Kevin O'Connell's offense, the way he likes to run it, which is attack the middle of the field. Those two guys are the best in this class at those over-the-middle heat ring throws, anticipating the windows in there. And that's how the Viking system, how the aerial-wise, how they open up the one-on-one shots down the sidelines, down the field. But I am going to go with Drake Maye and sort of hedge this thing with the odds percentages that there also could be a trade.
Ray, have you been to any local churches in Texas where you've heard some discussion about the draft?
Unfortunately, my pastor is not as tapped in is what goes down out there in those churches in Minnesota. But, man, thank you for the sermon this Sunday morning. I'm loving it, Thor.
So we'll go with Drake Maye at number 3 to New England. Right now, though, if you do think that you would have to project a trade into this, I'm guessing, if you do think it's going to be Drake Maye over J.J. McCarthy, and then it would also have to be predicated on Jayden Daniels going number 2. But if Minnesota did trade up to that spot, Thor, J.J. McCarthy is plus 350 to go as the number 3 pick.
Yeah, and I almost think, and who knows if I'll end up being proven wrong on this, but my supposition all along, in part because of the Josh McCown thing, and again, Drake Maye is a very good fit for the O'Connell offense because of those intermediate throws, and I think O'Connell, and he spoke to this when he was responding to the guy in the church about how there's certain things that he needs to see on the film, and if those boxes are checked, there's a couple things that he feels like he could be able to fix. He was speaking generally, but let's just say that obviously this thing went viral in the state of Minnesota, this little 2-minute video clip. There was a lot of thought that what he was speaking about was Drake Maye's footwork of you have all the stuff with the throwing and the arm and the anticipating the windows. The thing that you need to clean up is that footwork and keeping your mechanics with you always, because that is leading to some of this errancy that has been nitpicked a little bit about Drake Maye's game. So, yeah, I think because of that, the Vikings might lean that way. But I do think, again, for New England, if Jayden Daniels is off the board, for me, like what I hear things on both sides about their intentions with regards to JJ against Maye. So if New England is indeed stuck in this slot, I could see that one going either way. And by the way, whereas with Minnesota, I think either way, it's a very good fit for the quarterback who's coming in. I would see either of those guys having success. For New England, though, I would strongly advocate for JJ. And the reason why is their situation is so bad. They're going to want the quarterback to come in and play right away. I think JJ is the guy out of those two that you can project to come in and start week 1 if you want him to. He played in a 12 personnel offense for a sitting NFL head coach last season, won a national title as a 20-year-old junior running a 12 personnel pro style system there at Michigan. And down the stretch, the last 13 games of that season after the Bowling Green game, last 13 games where they played a procession of murderers row defenses, JJ McCarthy only threw 1 interception in those games. And for the people that think he was carried to the national title, that Michigan offense needed JJ McCarthy more than the other way around by quite a bit. If they did not have JJ McCarthy, for instance, they get smoked by Alabama. That's the way that game was going till the second half when JJ McCarthy decided to take over. Michigan roared back and then from a double-digit deficit ends up winning in overtime. But yeah, just for this, with the Patriots in this slot, we're going to go with Drake Maye.
Ray, the case that you laid out for the Patriots, and they need someone who can come in to compete with some of these other quarterbacks in the AFC East, wouldn't it behoove them? And I don't think this is how NFL franchises actually think. This is more like, hey, I'm a guy sitting at home. This is what I would do because I can simulate a season of Madden and not actually play it. But why do they need a quarterback to compete? They're not going to compete. So why not kick the can down the road and get some draft equity here?
Yeah, and for me, that's if I were the New England Patriots, and this is why I have maintained that potentially Marvin Harrison could be the selection for them. Now, the odds don't favor that, and I don't think that's going to be the case, but this isn't a team that I don't give a damn if it's Drake Maye or J.J. McCarthy, you ain't winning no AFC East in 2024. And here's the thing. That's okay. Build around your young quarterback. Put pieces in place for you to be competitive down the line. If I were running the New England Patriots and Robert Kraft, I would consider trading down at this point, acquiring some more capital. Because I just want to say this. I don't think it's a bad thing when you say that I would prefer this young quarterback to sit and wait. I personally would not want McCarthy coming in that New England Patriots team where your number one wide receiver is Pop Douglas and Kendrick Bourne and Hunter Henry. I don't need him to come in and play day one. I need you to come in, get acclimated to the NFL, because I don't give a damn how well he played at Michigan. The learning curve from college football to the NFL is significant. And we've seen, long gone are the days where it was okay for a rookie to sit a few games. Things will be okay. It does not diminish your opinion of the player's draft prospectus. It doesn't change the trajectory of the player. Give him some time to acclimate to the NFL game, because despite how good he played in spurts at Michigan, the fact remains that it is college to the NFL game. And I don't believe that sitting and waiting and learning for a little bit is a detriment. If I were New England, I would definitely be considering trading down, whether that be Minnesota or another team, acquiring some capital and seeing what else is out there as you move down the draft. But I know Pat fans don't want to hear that shit, Pat.
Yeah. Thor, what is the next year's class of QBs looking like, and how would Drake Maye or J.J. McCarthy stack up against those guys? If, let's say, all of a sudden New England's horrible this year because they don't draft a quarterback, they start Jacoby Brissett, they get the number 1, number 2 pick, would it be better for them to build up the capital, potentially do essentially what the Bears just did?
I love this question because it sets up the context really well for the audience. If J.J. McCarthy and Drake Maye are both young, right? I just mentioned McCarthy didn't turn 21 until really recently, and Drake Maye came out in the same high school class as he did. If either of those guys or both of those guys had gone back to school, they would have been QB 1 and 2 with a bullet, and then there would have been a little drop until we started talking about the next guys for the next class. Now that's heading into the season. Never know what can happen during the season, of course. There's a couple guys in the next class that one of them I see, I think, similarly to other people right now. That's Carson Beck from Georgia, has a very good arm. One guy that I like more apparently than looking around at other people's stuff, I like Shadir Sanders. But those two guys, you would not compare them right now to J.J. McCarthy or Drake Maye. If they had gone back to college, Drake Maye and J.J. McCarthy would have been 1-2. Then we can just start to discuss those other couple guys. And then, the other guys. Quinn Ewers is another guy, has arm talent, needs more consistency. He needs to work on his mechanics a little bit. He's sort of like the right-handed Penix, but further behind in the development curve right now as far as a lot of upper body action when he throws the pill, and it shoots out of his hand for sure. But we need to refine those mechanics a little bit because sometimes it's just a little bit errant. But that's what the quarterback class looking like for next year. I think it's a little bit better than people say when they just sort of toss it away like, get your quarterback this year because next year's class is going to stink. I do like a couple of those guys at the top of the board. But yeah, for sure, JJ and Drake Maye would have headed into next season of college football as 1-2 on that board.
Ray, Arizona is not trading their pick. They're leaving it to you to make their pick. Who are they taking?
Well, this is about as easy as it gets right here with the way the board has fallen with 3 quarterbacks off of the board. And despite the fact that some people in the fantasy space think that Marvin Harrison is not a top 5 wide receiver in this class, he will be the first wide receiver off of the board. And this makes total sense for the Arizona Cardinals. Hollywood Brown is gone right now, currently on their roster. I think they're outside of Michael Wilson, their next highest height wide receiver is like 5'9" in Greg Dortch. It's going to be Marvin Harrison Jr., who reminds me some Larry Fitzgerald. He's got some AJ Green to his game as well. This is a team that starved for an X wide receiver to pair with Kyler Murray, and it makes actually a quite potent offensive attack. And I've loved what Jonathan Gannon has done in Arizona. Their trading of picks last year, acquiring Paris Johnson, building up that offensive line. You bring James Conner back. You add Marvin Harrison to a team that already has Trey McBride at tight end, the dynamic weapon out of Colorado State from a couple of years ago. You put Marvin Harrison as that X. You slide Michael Wilson over to that Z spot. You find you a slot wide receiver. This offense was a lot better than people thought last year. People were thinking the Arizona Cardinals were going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. And despite the fact that the record didn't just show and suggest that they were one of the better teams, they were competitive in a lot of games that people didn't think they would be in. I love the direction of this franchise. I like what's going on in Arizona. In this pick of Marvin Harrison Jr., very rarely would I put the expectation on a rookie wide receiver to come in and be a dominant pass-catching weapon from day one. And while there will be learning curves for him because it happens for everybody, this is a rare case where I think Marvin Harrison comes in and he walks into 130-plus targets year one in Arizona with Kyler Murray. The pick is Marvin Harrison Jr. here at 4. I think they trade it, Pat, but the pick, if they stay, is Marvin Harrison Jr.
No trades in this draft, Thor, so I'm guessing.
I know.
I'm going to go with Marvin Harrison. I'm going to guess that's going to be your pick as well. But are these same fantasy people that Ray is alluding to the same ones who are like, Rondell Moore is awesome, and you need to play him every week in fantasy? Are they the same ones who say, like, Marvin Harrison's probably not that good? Are they just mad?
Yeah, I think that there's a lack of context with that sometimes. And of course, with Rondale coming out of Purdue, it was the manufactured touches close to the line of scrimmage, and then he'd get the yak, and that was something that he was very good at. And we have a couple guys later in this class, I think, that might fool some people that are yards after the catch guy after the spoon-fed touches. Marvin Harrison is the opposite of that. And you know, he didn't get to do he decided not to do the pre-draft process, which if I was his agent, I would have advised him the same. He is clearly a freak athlete. But just to give some data for people out there that, you know, that wanted that and didn't see him in college, maybe you're wondering, like, is this kid all he's baked up to be? Counting stats can lie, you know, and different stuff like that. Matt Harmon is as deep with wide receiver charting as anyone that we have out there. Every single class, he goes through all the different wide receiver prospects that are coming into the NFL and breaks down their tape by charting every single route that they won. What route was it? What kind of coverage were they seeing? Did they win on that concept? In his time doing the reception perception, Matt Harmon, Marvin Harrison broke the record for the rate that he was doubled by the defense, and of guys that were even within half that rate, it was almost 17% of the routes that Marvin Harrison Jr. ran, he was doubled in the sample that Matt Harmon charted. And of guys that even had half that rate of double team, Marvin Harrison had the highest win rate against double team of any of those guys. Why was he doubled so much in college, even though Ohio State had all these nasty wide receivers? Like, you're leaving yourself thin on the other guy, like Emeka Egbuka, for instance. Last season, you go to the season before, they had Jackson Smith and Jigba. Why would you delineate two defenders to Marvin Harrison every single time? I'll tell you why. In his 2 years as starters, the last 2 years, Marvin Harrison Jr. was 100th percentile PFF against single coverage in man. You can't leave one guy on Marvin Harrison Jr. in man. He will destroy him. So, and they found this out right away when he got on the field as a sophomore. That's why defensive coordinators started throwing more and more, not only exotic coverage looks at him, but just the rote double teams. And he was still beating them. Last year, they went from CJ Stroud to Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord was subsequently kicked out of Columbus. He found his way he was banished to Syracuse in the transfer portal. But at least Kyle McCord got it where his bread was buttered and would just pound targets at Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. led this class in target share last year. I think it was 33%. But the wild thing is, against man coverage, that target share spiked to 40%. When Kyle McCord knew it was a man coverage look, every single time looking at Marvin Harrison, I'm going to try to force the ball to him. And Marvin Harrison Jr. was still winning, even when he was doubled. There's nothing else that you can say about the guy, you know, outside of that. Of course, he also had a Hall of Fame personal tutor from birth, a Marvin Harrison Sr., a guy who needed to become a technician, a route running technician, a clockwork guy on the edges, the margins of his craft to reach Canton because he didn't have the physical measurables. His son got him and works just like his dad did. That is why we have this sort of prodigy of a wide receiver prospect. This one would be a no-brainer if Arizona stays in this slot.
All right, Chargers at number 5. Jim Harbaugh, now the new head coach. How do you think this affects who they're going to take at number 5 if they, and in this draft, they will be staying at this spot, Thor?
Well, there's some beautiful symmetry here because there's a very real possibility that Jim Harbaugh could be selecting the future home of his football son, J.J. McCarthy, in that aforementioned trade that we can't do if indeed he ends up getting down here. Because obviously the Chargers will be getting a ton of calls with them on the clock at this point. And you would be choosing the home for Mr. McCarthy, as opposed to potentially letting him slide one more slot and setting him into what could be a very bad situation in New York. I think if the Chargers stay here, the betting boards right now on this, they have had it as a receiver, ostensibly Malik Nabers. And Malik Nabers probably steered into that when there was that report that he was shopping for homes in California, which also had an effect on the betting market for this slot. You find that any little piece of news or mock draft, it tends to do that. I don't know what about Jim Harbaugh's history in football makes people believe that he is going to take a wide receiver over an amazing left tackle prospect. If that is indeed what the situation here, if they are stuck in this slot, which is what is going to happen here. I'm not going to give the Chargers Malik Nabers because that is not Jim Harbaugh's prerogative. In this slot, I'm going to give him the best offensive lineman in what is a nasty offensive line class. The number on this at the sports books, I believe, is still 9.5. So that's what we're talking about in the first round for the offensive lineman here. The tackles at the top are just so good, but one stands head and shoulders above the rest, literally and figuratively. That is Joe Alt. Just a massive guy with length, also has the athletic profile. In the last 2 years at Notre Dame, proved to be a two-way guy out there on the boundary at left tackle. Very good run blocker and doesn't let the guy anywhere near the quarterback, much less sacks, very little pressures or anything like that. He takes care of, cleans all that stuff up. Seems like the kind of guy that Harbaugh would like to build around. When Harbaugh was talking at the owners' meetings, I thought it was really interesting. He couldn't stop talking about how he couldn't wait to build up the offensive line, couldn't wait to get going on building up the offensive line. He wasn't talking about the roster as a whole. It was just, I can't wait to get in there and start building up that offensive line. That's how you have to build a team. You know what position is it where every other position depends on their success, but they don't depend on the other position's success? It's offensive line, is what he was telling reporters down there. I think Joe Alt would be the pick for the Chargers if they are stuck in the slot.
Ray, Eckler's gone, Everett's gone, Mike Williams is gone, Keenan Allen is gone. So Thor is right that the betting markets right now have Malik Nabers at 2-1 to be this pick. Joe Alt is now up to 5-1 from 9-1 over the weekend to be this pick. I mean, it makes a lot of sense with Harbaugh, doesn't it?
Pay attention to what the NFL teams are telling you. I cannot stress that enough. Everything that Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers have done since he accepted the job as head coach has screamed they are going to run the damn football. They go out, they sign Will Dissly, they trade away Keenan Allen, let Gerald Everett walk. They're bringing in Gus Edwards. Everything that they're doing is screaming, we are going to build from the trenches. And you look at what Greg Roman did during his time as offensive coordinator with Jim Harbaugh and over the past couple of years in Baltimore prior to Todd Monken taking over. You know what base formation that they ran more than anybody in the NFL? 22 personnel. They've got 2 damn tight ends on the field at all times. They're running multiple running backs on the field. They want to stack the line and force you to play their style of ball. And here's my thing. Why on earth do we think that at this point in Jim Harbaugh or Greg Roman's career that they're going to change the things that they have done to make them successful? It's building their line on both sides of the ball controlled off. It's having a smart decision maker at quarterback. I do not believe that there is a chance in hell that they take Malik Nabers right here over a Joe Alt. Hell, even if Taliese Fuaga is their number 1 rated tackle, whomever it may be, I do believe that they are going to address the offensive front with what they want to do. Pay attention to what the teams are telling you. I am in 100% agreement with Thor Nystrom. I believe they're going offensive tackle in this class.
All right.
Here at this pick.
Joe Alt to the Chargers at number 5. Now, New York Giants at number 6, Ray. What are they going to do?
All right, now we go back to the offensive side. We go offense here because the Giants, they need somebody to catch the ball for them. There's all this retirement speculation that Darren Waller may or may not be in the building. And you look at that wide receiver core right now, it's Jalen Hyatt. They bring back Isaiah Hodgins. You've got Wandale Robinson out there. They need a legitimate guy that can command the freaking ball. Now, I thought there were some situations where they could have went out in free agency and brought somebody in, but they've chosen not to do that. I do believe that here at number 6, they look for that next superstar caliber wide receiver for those big New York City Lights. And I do believe that would be Malik Nabers out of LSU. Since 2019, there's been no wide receiver that had a minimum of 75 targets in college football that had a higher yard per route run than Malik Nabers, which is a very good indicator for future success. 3.64 for Malik Nabers here this past season. Incredible talent. DJ Moore, Jamar Chase are two of the most frequent names that come up when you talk about Malik Nabers. The dynamism, the speed, the athleticism, his 0 to 60, as great as Marvin Harrison Jr. is, I don't know if he's got the start to stop juice that Malik Nabers does. It's not taking anything away from Marv's profile, but he plays at a different speed. Malik Nabers, he's got that, what people say, that dog in him, and he comes from a program where you can go back to the early LSU Tigers. I'm talking pre-Dwayne Bowe, and look at the success that the Michael Claytons have had, the Dwayne Bowes have had in the NFL, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson of recent. This kid is right on par with some of the LSU greats. If there were a player that I was like, I just think that there's no way that this kid busts, it's Malik Nabers, and I believe that if he's on the board here for the New York Giants, this is the type of wide receiver that head coach Brian Daboll is needed in this offense. Still significant question marks up front with the offensive line and the quarterback in general. But if they don't take a quarterback and they stay here at 6, I do believe that Malik Nabers would be the selection for the Giants.
Thor, would you agree it would be Nabers here and not J.J. McCarthy for some of the stuff that we talked about a little bit with New England, where they can get stuff in place for whoever the quarterback of the future is going to be next year, sign someone, draft someone, whatever it might be?
I'm of two minds here. I agree with everything that Ray said there. And in the short term, for sure, that, like, you have that receiving core where it's Slayton, Robinson, Hyatt, Hodgins at the top there. Obviously atrocious right now. If you put the true blue wide receiver 1 on top of that, those guys, all of a sudden it starts to look like a real receiving core, because all those guys get knocked down one slot, and now you can do interesting mix match stuff with your second and third receiver. And then you start to think, if you had that, then you have a full season of Darren Waller, which I know that is probably the most ridiculous supposition we'll make on the show this year. But if you did, you get him healthy at least for a second of the season, and then you have the true blue wide receiver 1. Now the rest of the offense can start playing up. You have the smart play caller in Daboll. So I get everything about that. The thing that I wonder about this pick, all spring you think about this is, the Giants have put out there's this idea that maybe they did it intentionally as a smokescreen, that if quarterback 4 is available here, they're going to take them, which in terms of the short term might not make a ton of sense. You would still have that rickety offensive line. You'd still have that terrible wide receiving core. And you have this coaching staff that may or may not need to win next season to retain their jobs. But if you start to think about it a little bit more, it does make a little bit of sense that sometimes you draft the quarterback, you're going to buy yourself the extra season just right there. And the other thing is, you think back to last season with the Broncos and Russell Wilson and what happened at the end of that season, where the Broncos could not risk Russell Wilson getting hurt, because if he was hurt past the date when they could release him, then they would have to take 1 extra year of guaranteed money with Russell Wilson. So they'd be stuck with him for another year. It's a very similar thing with Daniel Jones. The Giants have to keep him on their roster this coming season, but they can release him with very little pain next offseason, so long as he is not hurt at that time. So they are incentivized to try to keep him on the bench. They signed Drew Lock, which isn't a very plausible explanation to give people as to, that's why we're keeping Daniel Jones on the bench. If you take the young quarterback, though, it gives you way more plausible deniability there. So you're developing the young quarterback in addition to having a reason to keep Daniel Jones on the bench. So then there's not that possibility that we're going to have to keep him into the future on that crazy cap hit that he has. I'm going to put you to a decision here, Mayo, because I go back and forth. I hear this thing both ways of they would take that immediate help for the roster with the receiver position. And I also hear they are not bluffing with the quarterback. So just to make this interesting, I'm going to put this back on your plate. I'm going to give the Giants J.J. McCarthy and make you decide.
How dare you? I don't like this. I'm going to side with Ray on this one. I think the Malik Nabers makes the most sense of this pick, because Play Daniel Jones, make sure he doesn't get hurt, and then be terrible. Then bring in Drew Lock and continue to be terrible. Then get the better pick next year. If they draft J.J. McCarthy, they are basically bringing him into a no-win situation. And I think that we see this a lot with young quarterbacks who come in. Like, you can kind of 1v1 look at the most successful quarterbacks of the past 10 years. Yeah, you have your super talented guys who are going to go first overall, like Joe Burrow, who are going to succeed in a situation because they're so good. But most of the guys that end up successful are the mid-round guys that just go to better teams, aren't they, Ray?
And that would be, and I know we're doing this based off of what we believe the Giants would do, but that would be my biggest fear for McCarthy or Jayden Daniels landing in New York, because I do believe that Daboll is coaching for his job this year. They turn out a piss-poor season again like they did this past season. I don't know if he survives. And the one thing that I wouldn't want to see one of these young, talented quarterbacks walk into is one of these lame duck situations to where normally head coach gone, new head coach comes in, they bring their groceries with them, right? Deion Sanders said it at Colorado, I'm bringing my luggage with me. And I wouldn't want to see J.J. McCarthy in a position a la sort of where Will Levis is right now in Tennessee, where if he plays well this year, you can definitely see Brian Callahan and company keeping them on as their quarterback of the future. But if not, they could be in the same situation where they're picking the Carson back or the Shedeur Sanders in 2025. And I wouldn't want that same type of situation to exist for J.J. McCarthy in New York. Listen, he hasn't come off of the board yet, but I don't think this is a bad thing at all for J.J. McCarthy's perspectives. Let the Giants take Malik Nabers, and I guarantee McCarthy lands in a better situation than what's happening right now in New York.
Well, Thor, would you give J.J. McCarthy to Tennessee, who has the next pick?
I don't think, I think they need to do the thing of that Chicago tried with Fields last year of give Levis more help, and then we'll give him one more shot, full year with more help. And then if it doesn't work out, then that's when we do. Because if next year is disastrous for the Titans, they were assuredly going to have the top 5 pick. And then that next quarterback class we talked about, they could be at the front of the line for that. But I think their prerogative is going to be to give him one more shot. You can give him Levis some benefits of the doubt about his situation. The offensive line is a train wreck. The receiving core is not very good. So let's at least try with that. I think that they're going to lean offensive line here. Right now, their tackles are Petit Friere on the one side and Dylan Radins on the other side. Not the best there. We need to do something to fortify that, especially because Will Levis, we talked about this last year this time. The thing you like about him, it is that big-time arm that he has. But the nitpick that we had about him, and it wasn't necessarily a surprise to us why he started to fall down, the one weak area of his game, it was standing back there in the pocket and surveying to allow him to use that big arm downfield, but didn't sense the pass rush very well. And you saw him a lot at Kentucky get smoked from behind or all of a sudden start to panic when he denoted it too late. The Titans need to give him one shot behind at least a competent-ish offensive line, which the only way that they have a shot to put that together for this coming season is by delineating this very pick to an offensive lineman, and preferably one that could start on the blind side. And that becomes the thing that gets interesting here, because I love J.C. Latham. In fact, he is my second-rated tackle, but he's going to be an awesome right tackle in the NFL. You're not going to play him at left tackle. And then, of course, Fuaga and Mims are also right tackle guys. Fuaga may even go into guard. We'll have to see on him. Fashanu, I think, is the dark horse here. Olu Fashanu from Penn State. I have nitpicks about his game. I know other people have some nitpicks about his game. Some people absolutely love him. He's in this sort of tackle class at the top here. He's the one that draws the most polarization of opinions. The last couple of years, he did not give up any sacks in what was a very risk-averse Penn State throwing offense with Drew Allard. They don't let him throw downfield, but Fashanu did not give up any sacks. He looks very natural with that. Like, he has a very intuitive understanding of that, and he uses the length very well and everything like that. But that's a feel that you do not see with him when he's coming back is where you see natural feel with him. When he has to go forward in the run game, that is what he's always struggled with. He's gotten a little bit better, but he was a terrible run blocker, like literally a terrible run blocker 2 years ago. He's gotten a bit better, but going to the NFL, that could be the problem area of his game right away. There was also the weird narrative about him of having these strangely small hands for a player that big. I think he has the smallest hands ever for an offensive tackle prospect that has that's 6'6" or above with the arm length that he does. But all that stuff aside, I'm going to go off the grid here and toss Fashanu to the Titans, because I think they're going to be prioritizing the left tackle as opposed to just a tackle. And at that point, it comes down to Fautanu against Fashanu. Did they believe that Fautanu from Washington, even though he's a shade under 6'4", 317, that he could hang at left tackle? If they believe that, I think that becomes a really interesting discussion in their war room. But Fashanu from Penn State, we know that he is the left tackle projection. If he doesn't cut it at left tackle, his utility in the NFL all of a sudden becomes very murky. But what does he do? The one thing we know he does is pass protect. That is the thing that Will Levis needs from the blind side for his passing game to play up. So I think that is sort of the dark horse possibility here that maybe not enough people are talking about, assuming that Joe Alt is not available here, which of course is what we had in our exercise with LA sticking and picking a couple slots above. So I'm going to send Olu Fashanu from Penn State, the offensive tackle, to the Titans here.
Ray, what do you think the Titans are going to do here at number 7?
Oh, they've got to take tackle. The offensive line is atrocious. It's a mess. They've lost it. And one of the things that Thor didn't touch on is the fact that they lost their security blanket in Derrick Henry. They've lost the hammer running back that when hell or high water hits, and hand the ball to Derrick Henry, and he's been able to bail Tennessee out for years. Now they've replaced him with Tony Pollard, and you've got second-year running back Tajay Spears, who I like a ton. But they've got to do everything in their power to figure out if Will Levis is going to be their quarterback of the future. And they already started that by bringing in Calvin Ridley. So while I know a lot of Titans fans are, maybe Rome Odunze, I think they've addressed it. Their receiver core is fine enough with Chigo Okonkwo, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins. Hell, Kyle Phillips, Treylon Burks as ancillary pieces, not very good as standalone number 1, number 2 options. But you've got to protect Will Levis. And in a division where the Colts are getting better, you're looking at what DeMeco Ryans is building in Houston and the Jacksonville Jaguars, bringing Josh Allen back on a mega deal. You better protect Will Levis, and you better be able to create some running lanes for those 2 running backs, or else you will be drafting Shedeur Sanders or Carson Beck at the top of the draft in 2025.
So are you going to agree on the pick with Thor or not?
That is, and this is why Thor is on the show. This is why we are here, because this is, and I don't even want to say off the beaten path, because for a long time, Fashanu was right up there with Joe Alt as one of the top 2 tackles in this class. And I know he was injured at the combine, got hurt during the combine, but he is still a very young, very athletic, very talented tackle. And I actually think he fits well in this offense with Callahan. So I like this. I like Taliese Fuaga, and I like Troy Fautanu. Both of those guys could be in play here. Fuaga, we'll see where he ends up playing. He reminds me a little bit of Tyler Smith that the Dallas Cowboys have, where he's playing guard right now. People thought he could have played tackle, but got that big bulking size to play inside. I think Fashanu would be an excellent choice for Tennessee, and a player that 2 or 3 years down the line you can talk about as one of the better tackles in the NFL. Love this pick for Tennessee. They need it.
All right, well, who do you have going to the Atlanta Falcons at number 8 then?
Well, let me just tell you this. Over the last 5 years, Pat, the Atlanta Falcons are not second to last, not third to last, not bottom quadrant, dead last at the NFL at generating sacks against the opposing teams. They need help getting after the quarterback in the worst way. And what's interesting about this Atlanta defense with Raheem Morris over here now, you've got Zach Robinson calling the offensive shots and designing that offense. Defensively, they've got to generate pressure. And there's one guy in this class that I believe has the tools. He's like that mold of clay that you can just mold into anything that you want. That's Dallas Turner, the edge rusher out of Alabama. This guy has been on the radars. It didn't just start in February. I mean, you saw him playing dominant football across from Will Anderson, the reigning defensive rookie of the year from the Houston Texans. He looks like a freak. Now, he's Compton compared to Micah Bit. I don't believe he's that level of explosive athlete off the edge. But Dallas Turner in Atlanta with Raheem Morris, you talk about a player that makes everybody else better. The Falcons dead last over the last 5 years in sacks, but they're in the top quadrant in the NFL in interceptions, which means they've got some good guys on the back end. Jesse Bates coming over from Cincinnati. You have A.J. Terrell. If you want to help those defensive players out, those DBs, damn it, I play DB, so I've got a soft spot for my defensive brothers back there in the defensive backfield. Get somebody that can get after the quarterback and make life hell. And when you're talking about a damn division that you've got Baker Mayfield, Bryce Young, and Derek Carr, get somebody that can just move off the line of scrimmage on the defensive side of the ball, and you should be able to hit the quarterback. I'm going Dallas Turner out of Alabama for the Atlanta Falcons here at 8.
Thor, would that make sense? The first defensive player coming off the board at number 8?
For those that don't doubt Ray Garvin's football playing chops, he actually played with an NFL player on his college team, Mr. Danny Woodhead. So just shout out to Ray for that. As far as the Falcons go, the edge rusher has been talked about a lot with their pick. If they're staying in this slot, I'm actually going to deviate on this one. I think, and Ray brought this up when during his explanation of the backfield, the cornerback position across from AJ Terrell is the other acute area of need. I think that's the discussion that they're talking about right now of would we prioritize the edge? Would we prioritize the corner? I think when they come up next on the clock, the edge rusher, they could project that there's going to be a more immediately ready to play potentially edge rusher at that point, might defer to the cornerback here. And there's you would get to lead the dance, obviously, on either of them. But I'm going to toss out Quinyon Mitchell here, the cornerback from Toledo. All the physical measurables are there. He dominated at college at Toledo. Now, it was in a bad conference. He got to play the off coverage, a lot of zone concepts there, although the NFL is going more towards that. But down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl that Ray and I were both at, we got to see Mitchell doing in the one-on-one drills, doing more man stuff off the line. He was shutting out the lights on everybody there, was the most impressive defensive back that we got to see down there in practices and sort of prove the concept of the rest of it. And then, of course, at the NFL Combine, 90th percentile athlete, a little over 6 foot, 200 pounds, with a 4.33 340 and a 38-inch vert, which are both near the top of this class. So I'm going to toss out Quinyon Mitchell to go a little bit off the beaten trail with this one.
It's funny because I would think that the Falcons have become predictable like the Raiders used to be, that they'll probably just take the best tight end or wide receiver available every single year. Doesn't matter how many they have at this point. So let's keep taking them. Are they still available? Hell, let's just take them and add to the pile, see if that eventually works. But I do think this is sort of the defensive version of that Dallas Turner, I wouldn't say local, but played in the SEC, big name on defense. It always feels like Atlanta wants to make a bit of a splash with a headline, having the first defensive player drafted here. And I just think they end up going with Dallas Turner because I agree with, yes, they do need another corner, but at least they do have someone there already that they can point to as someone good at the position. When we think about defensive line, like this is now could be your star of that unit. So I think that Dallas Turner goes to Atlanta at number 8. It is officially time to hit the speed round of the draft because we're an hour in. We've been through 8 picks. So, Thor, let's speed it up with Chicago's second pick on the clock at number 9.
You got Caleb Williams with the first one. With this one, Rome Odunze is still there. And so even though I think they have more potentially pressing needs on their team with the edge, defensive front, some of those other different ones, I don't know how you turn down Rome Odunze here if he falls down here. So we're going to send Rome Odunze to Chicago.
Ray, do you think that would be the move? The number 3 receiver coming off the board. They did just sign Keenan Allen. They already have DJ Moore. Do you just continue to enhance what you do with your first pick, or do you try to continue to build up the defense?
This is one where for a long time I did too think that wide receiver made the most sense for the Chicago Bears, but they're already talking about re-signing Keenan Allen. You have DJ Moore there. I want to protect Caleb Williams. So right here, I am going to go with Taliese Fuaga, the offensive tackle / guard out of Oregon State, to solidify that line. They picked Darnell Wright last year. Let's protect Caleb Williams because the Detroit Lions are coming. The Green Bay Packers are coming, and I think the Minnesota Vikings are doing moves. So I'm going to opt for offensive tackle Taliese Fuaga out of Oregon State for the Chicago Bears here, but I'll let you make the pick. Another decision on Pat Mayo.
Okay, what are the Bears going to do with this pick? They're going to take a receiver. Of course they are. Get someone young under contract, and they can pretend about re-signing Keenan Allen all they want, but they'll just end up letting Keenan Allen walk, and then you have someone a bit cheaper who's probably even better to replace him in the spot. And then it's almost like JSN in Seattle right now, where he doesn't need to be awesome year one. He just needs to improve year one, and then you can kind of turn it over to him the longer this rookie deal goes through. So I'll take Rome to the Chicago Bears at number 9. Jets on the clock at number 10, Ray. I have a bet on who is going to go pick number 10 at 10-1, but I have a feeling it's not going to hit. Who are you going to take for the Jets?
I know the Jets brought in my old longtime Dallas Cowboy left tackle, Tyron Smith, to help protect Aaron Rodgers, but that ain't enough. They have got to protect Aaron Rodgers, and I know Brock Bowers is a fun pick to mock here to the Jets at 10, but I think they are all in on Aaron Rodgers and this team and protecting Aaron Rodgers in that bum Achilles tendon. Trust me, if anybody knows about Achilles tendons, it would be me who tore mine at the Fantasy Football Expo a few years ago. But protect Aaron Rodgers at all costs. It's the only chance in hell the Jets have to be competitive offensively. We saw what happened last year without Rodgers there. And this isn't the same Rodgers when he was 37, 38, winning MVP, but he is 100 times better than Zach Wilson or anybody else they tried to roll out there. So let's protect Aaron Rodgers. And damn it, we're going to get Fuaga off of the board by hell or high water. Taliese Fuaga from Oregon State, go out there and protect Aaron Rodgers in the bright city of New York. I'm going offensive guard, offensive tackle Fuaga out of Oregon State.
Okay. Where are you going with this, Thor? Because I do have an offensive lineman going to the Jets for my bet. It's just not that offensive lineman.
Yeah, I was breaking down the tape of Garvin down there at the Fantasy Football Expo. He still has that beautiful back pedal we talked about when he was coming out during his process. But of course, the durability concerns, they cropped their head there. But in all seriousness, I am going to go chalk here with Brock Bowers. Here's what I know. I know the Jets love Rome Odunze. So if you had this scenario where Rome gets to 9, I know that they would be trying to work the phones with Tennessee, Atlanta, I don't know that Chicago would do the one flip, although they did last year with the one with the Eagles. The Eagles ended up taking Jalen Carter, and then Chicago went back one spot. And interestingly enough, my comp for Fuaga is Darnell Wright. So there could be some symmetry as far as that goes. But with the Jets here, I'm going to give them Bowers. The thing that I buy about that, they have a need both with the pass catching tight end, but also just with their slot guy. Their starters right there are not the best. Bowers, you can't think about him as a traditional tight end. He's just a dude you get the ball to, manufacture it however you want, deploy him wherever you want. Aaron Rodgers is going to love that. Kirby Smart mentioned about Brock Bowers. If they had used him at running back at Georgia, he would have been the best running back on their roster. He sort of has like this Deebo Samuel of tight ends utility where you can also do the fun stuff with him with the end arounds and different stuff like that. So I'm going to go with Bowers and put this decision to you again, Mr. Mayo.
Yeah, the Jets want some flash. I really hope they draft an offensive lineman, for my bet to come through. But yeah, they'll take a tight end. Come on. They'll just do it. Unless Aaron Rodgers really says, hey, I need more protection, not a super weapon. Whatever Rodgers says, they're going to do. So I'll say it's Brock Bowers at number 10. Thor, Minnesota on the clock still at 11. This worked out perfectly for them, didn't it?
Yeah, this would be all-time no-brainer, all-time run the card in celebrations and angels singing in Minneapolis if they get boxed out of the trade up and then JJ McCarthy ends up falling down the board and they can retain the 23rd pick and then their first round pick next year. That's been the three-dimensional chess that they've been thinking through there in the building when they're talking about the trade up possibilities and different stuff like that. But on the other side of it, there's so many awesome prospects here in the top 10 that we just went through. So that could lead to some reticence on the other side that potentially could lead to a scenario maybe that looks something like this. But this one is easy. Talked about the fit with McCarthy in Kevin O'Connell's offense, the throwing over the middle stuff. He's awesome throwing on the run. He's an athletic kid, 6th best three-cone time at the NFL Combine, irregardless of position, after he weighed in 17 pounds heavier than his Michigan bio. I believe if he had run the 40, that it would have been in the 4.4s. Also has the arm strength, 61 mile per hour max velocity throw at the combine was one underneath the record that Joe Milton tied of Josh Allen this year. But you see that stuff very good under duress. Awesome in the high leverage stuff, 3rd and 4th down, different stuff like that. And of course, won the national title, 61-3 as a starter going back to high school. So we're sending JJ McCarthy to my Minnesota Vikings.
Ray, out of the big 4 quarterbacks in this draft, now that we're going to lump McCarthy in with them, and he's probably not going to go this late in real life at number 11, I assume that would be your pick to the Vikings. So we'll go a little bit off the beaten path here. Who's the most likely to bust, do you think?
This is a tough one. Most likely to bust. I think when we do this, a lot of times we lean on our own personal evaluations, but I am a true believer in the situation absolutely matters. The situation that these players, more players, have been ruined by situation and coaching and developed because they just don't have the time in the NFL to wait. So when I look at these 4 quarterbacks, which one would have the biggest potential to bust? I don't believe it's Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, so we scratched J.J. McCarthy off of the books. Caleb Williams to Chicago, absolutely. We know what Chicago has done with quarterbacks historically, but Caleb Williams is a different character. So by process of elimination, you're looking at Jayden Daniels with Cliff Kingsbury in Washington and Dan Quinn, and you're looking at New England, which none of us really know what the hell to expect from the New England Patriots. So the situation that makes me a little more fearful of all four of these landing spots, it would be the New England Patriots. So by product of that, Drake Maye in New England in this mock, that would be the one that would be most fearful for me of not succeeding at the NFL level.
Well, I'm going to throw it back to you with the Denver Broncos, who are now on the clock.
Well, let me just start by saying this. I don't think there's a chance in hell they take Bo Nix here at 12. I know we're seeing that a lot in these mocks. There's steam there. That would not be an optimal pick. That would be a suboptimal selection at this stage in the draft. And I believe with Thor, and I think I got Quinyon Mitchell as the first defensive player off of the board, 7.5 to 1 the other day. I don't know what the current odds are right now, but you look at this defensive team, they're not going to, I do not believe they are going to take Bo Nix. You've got Patrick Surtain on one side. The ability to grab Quinyon Mitchell here to pair with PS2, Patrick Surtain the second, if you can't outscore Patrick Mahomes, you can't outscore those high-flying offenses, damn it, try to shut them down. And defensively, I think that's where Denver would go with this selection. Quinyon Mitchell falling to them at 12, I call that kind of a gift because I do believe he should be a top 10 pick in this draft. So for me, the Denver Broncos, they load up on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe they get the Bo Nix in the second round, but they take Quinyon Mitchell, the cornerback out of Toledo now. And Thor, I'd argue and say he wasn't just the best defensive player at the Senior Bowl. He was the best overall prospect there from start to finish with his performance on the field that week. Quinyon Mitchell was that damn good that week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in the one-on-ones at those all-star events, for people that haven't been there before, you haven't seen the practices on TV, those one-on-ones with the receiver against a defensive back out in space, heavily tilted towards the offense. So to see one defensive back go out there and just shut out the lights one after the other on all these good receiving prospects out there on the field was just so impressive, especially when that was the one question about Quinyon was coming up from first of all, the scheme he was in, like I mentioned, played a little bit off. They had the zone concept there more at Toledo in that bad conference. And so it was like, well, we know he's a stud athlete. We know he's built well. We know he played well, awesome at Toledo. But what happens when you put him off the line and strand him in man coverage on an island against the best of the best? Well, he proved it down there. Was like, okay, we can do that. And he had a couple shots in college, Marvin Harrison Jr. against some good receivers. Never embarrassed himself. I'm with Ray on this one. We're sending Quinyon to Denver.
All right, back to you then, Thor, for the Las Vegas Raiders with the next pick.
This one, sort of similar to what Ray was talking about with the last one, where there's been the connection with Knicks and Denver, and there's been some connections if Las Vegas is not able to do the pie in the sky thing, which is move up for Jayden Daniels. Of course, their head coach helped bring Jayden Daniels into Arizona State. That at this spot, they might be interested in getting Michael Penix. I think that would be egregious. I don't think that they can do that. Maybe that would open up the possibility of a trade back, but you can't end up taking him here. So at this spot, I'm going to go with the offensive line help, another spot that they need to build up, potentially maybe in order to set up that move for a quarterback later on day 2 there. Ray, you've been trying to get him off the board, so let's do it now and send your boy from Oregon State, Taliese Fuaga, to the Oakland Raiders.
Do you like it, Ray?
I'm pumping my damn fist back here. Let's go. Love the fit. And I'm with Thor. This is, again, the smoke out there is a quarterback. And I'll just say this. I don't believe that Aiden O'Connell would have been valued as a first-round pick in this year's class had he come out this year. But I do think that there is some quiet confidence in the quarterback room, at least that they have in place right now, to where they're not going to spend the 13th overall pick on the 5th or 6th best quarterback in this class. With this caliber of tackle, this offensive line class has the potential to be very special. And for some of these players to still be on the board, Thor, we haven't talked about J.C. Latham. He's still on the board. The Washington kid, Fautanu, is still on the board. This just makes too much sense for the Raiders, who quietly were competent towards the end of last season, and we'll see how Antonio Pierce does as the full-time head coach. But I think at this stage in this division, you protect whatever quarterback is going to be there. you draft that tackle or offensive guard, and you're in a better spot because of that.
Ray, we'll stick with you with the New Orleans Saints.
Saints need the same damn thing. I mean, it's literally a carbon copy of what we just talked about with the Raiders. They need offensive tackle help in the worst way. You've got J.C. Latham out of Alabama, but I believe Fautanu out of Washington. Troy, this young man, there's a lot of conversation about him potentially kicking inside the guard as well. I think he can play on the outside. I think you can hang him on the edge and let him be an anchor. The Saints need this in the worst way. They need a lot of stuff in New Orleans, quarterback being one of them, probably another competent wide receiver opposite of Chris Olave. But you know what? It starts and stops up front. And to have this caliber of tackle fall to you right here, I'm taking Troy Fautanu out of Washington for the New Orleans Saints. Should be a staple up front for them for years to come.
Thor, I would prefer he go number 10 to the Jets, but is this a good landing spot for him with the Saints?
I totally agree with everything that Ray said. I'm just going to put you to the decision with tossing out Latham, so you can decide between Latham and Fautanu. But everything that Ray said up there is absolutely correct, and the Saints should be going offensive line help here, and that's what I expect them to be doing.
I'll go with Fautanu to the Saints. Indianapolis on the clock, Thor.
Indianapolis could go a couple different ways. You could go cornerback has been one that has been tossed out. One fit that I love there that I've been putting into some mocks, I think, is Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, because he is that true downfield burner who is awesome. Like, you see the physical ability that he tested with the 4.3 wheels at that size. But his usage at LSU, just the downfield killer last year. The one nitpick you have about him is, well, what about the other stuff? Because he didn't get to run as many of those other kind of routes, just the constitution of it. But we know he's going to be an assassin downfield, and we know that the quarterback for the Colts not only has that bazooka to get the ball downfield, but also you want to disincentivize defenses from being able to come up and load those boxes up against Taylor, and then also to stop Anthony Richardson's scrambling machinations when he wants to do that as well. So we need to terrify defenses with a dude on the outside and help out the spacing for everybody else. So I'm going to go a little bit off the grid on this one and go against the odds boards, and I'm going to send Brian Thomas from LSU to Indianapolis here.
Brian Thomas, LSU. Okay, I was not expecting that. Ray, what do you think?
I love it. I mean, when you've got a young quarterback like Anthony Richardson, who's still learning, he only played in a handful of games, and one of the big question marks on A-Rich coming out was accuracy issues. You've got one twin tower in Michael Pittman Jr. Playing the X, which they just gave a $70 million deal to. You add another 6'3" wide receiver opposite of Michael Pittman Jr. You've got Josh Downs in the slot. You give your young quarterback, who may struggle a little bit with some accuracy, big body targets that can scream down the field, get open quickly. I love the fit, and if it weren't Brian Thomas Jr., one of the other players that I've seen commonly mocked here would be a Brock Bowers, another dynamic playmaker for Shane Steichen in this offense. Great pick here, Thor. I love the selection of Brian Thomas. All
right, so Brian Thomas going to the Colts right now. I guess, yeah, if Brock Bowers fell down, how many tight ends, Ray, could the Colts possibly have? Like 8? Because they have every tight end you've never heard of. And you're like, oh, yeah, Mo Alley Cox, perfect. Oh, Ogletree, perfect. They just have dudes.
Hey, don't you forget about Kylan the Goat Granson there as well. Kylan Granson out there. They need some tight end help, all right? They need some tight end help, Pat. If Bowers were on the board here, I definitely think that would be in play, but likelihood of him falling to 15 probably slim.
Seattle is on the clock at 16, Ray. Why is there never any talk about them trading up for a quarterback? Because, like, Geno kind of reeks.
He does. He does. But let me not poo-poo for him to get his career and rehabilitate his career to the point of where he was, the win comeback player of the year. Kudos to Geno Smith. But definitely, this is a team where he is not going to be their long-term starter of the future. But I'll say this as well. I don't believe it's going to be Sam Howell.
No.
I think at 16, it's probably just a little too pricey for them to move up to get in range to strike for a true quarterback difference maker. And I'm talking about one of the big four and not Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. But this is a team who 2 years ago, it looked like they had their bookend tackles of the future that they landed in the draft. And I know they suffered with some injuries, Charles Cross and Abe Lucas last year. They need interior offensive line help in the worst way. But Mike McDaniel is already talking about changing the identity, changing the identity of the Seattle team. And one of the things that they need on the defensive side of the ball, they need somebody that can get after the quarterback. And in a division where you got to stop Matthew Stafford, you got to deal with Kyler Murray running around, and damn, you've got Kyle Shanahan and that 49ers offense that you have to contend with. Jared Verse is still on the board right here at 16. So I am going to go with Florida State's Jared Verse to the Seattle Seahawks here at 16.
Thor, would you concur with Ray on his assessment of the Seahawks?
I do, and I would love the value proposition of Verse here. Verse is actually the edge one on my board, so I wouldn't argue with that at all. In these mock drafts, this is going back at least one spring, and certainly this one. I have been begging Seattle to help out their offensive line, but in particular on the interior, they have some issues there. So I'm not going to argue against the first one. I'm just going to present you with another potential option here, Mr. Mayo. And go, this is another one that's slightly outside the box, but a guy that I think could go a little bit higher than people are currently thinking. And I think this is a really sneaky landing spot for him. Graham Barton from Duke, a guy who was a stud left tackle the last couple years in the ACC, began his career at Duke as the starting center, and he was very good there as well. Then he went out in the pre-draft process and tested awesome at 6'5", 311, tested as a 99th percentile size-adjusted athlete by Raz. So a guy that you can project potentially to play up to 5 different spots on a Seattle offensive line that needs help. You bring him into camp, figure it out there, but you know he is going to be one of your 5 starters, wherever that is. So I'll put the decision to you, Mr. Mayo.
I'm going to go with Jared Verse here. I mean, just even from reading your stuff too, Thor, having him as the top edge on the board, I just think this would be too good to pass up for the Seahawks in this spot. We're midway through the draft right now. I want to remind everyone once again, code Mayo at underdogfantasy.com. Get you that match deposit of up to $100. The newsletter where you can find all of this information and the results of the mock draft, free to subscribe to, down in the description right now. If you're into spring football, runthesims.com is probably where you want to be with simulations, projections. If you want to get in on anything spring football-wise, runthesims.com is exactly where you need to be. So we're going to change up the rules a little bit for the second half of this draft, and we're just going to go 1v1. No more putting me to a decision. Thor, you are up at number 17 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Whoever you pick will be the pick, and then it will go to Ray, although we'll probably let Ray have Dallas as the pick if it doesn't line up that way like we do every single year once we get to the second half of the draft. But Thor, you're up for the Jags at number 17.
Yeah, this one feels it's felt easy for me, and almost too easy. Like where it's like, should I be second guessing myself more? But the Jaguars need cornerback help in the worst way, and I feel like, and like happened in this exercise here, that really good value will be available to them. Only one cornerback has come off the board so far, which means that Terrion Arnold from Alabama is still there. Terrion Arnold was awesome last year. No one was talking about him heading into the year. Now they're talking about him way more than the guy they were talking about, Kool-Aid McKinstry. You could make the argument for Terrion against Quinyon Mitchell. Quinyon's the one who has all the measurables, and of course it down in Mobile, what we talked about before. But Terrion's just so smooth on the field, just such a smart player, and the coverage chops and the backpedaling and all that different stuff. So we're gonna send Terrion to Jacksonville.
Okay, Ray, you are up next. Pick number 18 with the Cincinnati Bengals.
This one feels like if I were the Cincinnati Bengals, they're probably running to the podium at this point because they have a tackle on the board that fell to them here at 18. And this is a tackle that I honestly, come draft day, I don't know if he lasts this long. But J.C. Latham out of Alabama, you're talking about protecting Joe Burrow. That should be their number one goal this draft process. Make sure your damn quarterback finishes the season. I mean, if Cincinnati, any chance that they have, it hinges on Joseph Burrow being there for the entire season, and you add Latham, and they've been searching. They brought in La'el Collins, who was a massive bust, couldn't protect anything on the right side. They have got to keep Joe Burrow upright. This tackle class, we talked about Graham Barton, who we'll talk about later down this mock, but I think that you're talking about a road grading right tackle that's got the potential to slide over to the left at some point down the line. You get Joe Burrow, J.C. Latham, I think he'd be a very happy man, and the Cincinnati Bengals offense operates more efficiently with him at right tackle.
J.C. Latham shall be the official pick to the Cincinnati Bengals at number 18. The L.A. Rams are on the clock, Thor, at number 19 here. And, Sean McVay, he's going to pick an offensive player. Are you buying into that?
Not this time. I think that if the Bengals have just run their card in, I think the Rams are running right behind them with their card with the name of Byron Murphy Jr. on it from Texas. Aaron Donald obviously retired earlier this offseason. Byron Murphy, no one's going to fill those shoes completely. But Byron Murphy is the top dude in this interior defensive line class and a guy that goes in there immediately and gives you that interior pressure. That thing that helped so much on the defensive side of the ball these last several years with Aaron Donald there. I also like Murphy, despite the dimensions and despite his ability to get after the quarterback, also keeps gap integrity and leverage on the run concepts. He's not one of those riverboat gambler three technique gap shooter guys where on running concepts, he's going to seed that open hole every single time. So I think that this is the fit for Los Angeles here.
Okay, so Byron Murphy to the Rams at number 19. Next up, the Pittsburgh Steelers with Russell Wilson, Ray, as their starting quarterback. Maybe Justin Fields, we'll see.
Here's the thing. Even though we're talking a little bit about the offense side of the ball and what Arthur Smith may or may not do with the Pittsburgh Steelers, their defensive secondary needs help in the worst way possible. They need help right now with only Dante Jackson, Corey Trice, Joey Porter Jr., and a couple of guys that I've never heard of in their secondary, their defensive backfield. They've got to get some speed. They've got to add some playmakers. There are a couple of corners in this class still on the board that I like a ton. You've got one kid out of Clemson, Nate Wiggins, who can absolutely fly. Little thinner, leaner type cornerback frame. Maybe that would allow Dante Jackson to kick inside and play some of that nickel cornerback spot. You also have Cooper Dejean out of Iowa, who didn't get to do a lot because of the injury through the pre-draft process. Cornerback class is nice as well, and I do believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers need to address that side of the ball. We're going to go with the guy Nate Wiggins out of Clemson, pair him up in Mike Tomlin's defense, add some element of speed, pair him with Minkah Fitzpatrick, Joey Porter Jr., their second-round pick of last year. You've got a formidable defensive secondary in a division where you got to have it. Against Cincinnati twice a year, you got to deal with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore twice a year, and whatever the Browns are going to roll out there on the offensive side of the ball. Nate Wiggins out of Clemson, going to Pittsburgh.
Nate Wiggins to the Steelers. Now back on the clock, the Miami Dolphins, Thor. Who are they taking?
The Dolphins have all those flashy offensive pieces. The one sort of negative part of their offense last year, they had some leaks along the offensive line. And I think it would be really smart to attempt to address that. I'm going to do that for them here with the guy I was just talking about a little bit ago, Graham Barton from Duke, has the position versatility, like I was mentioning, could go all over. But for the Dolphins in the short term, badly need a starting guard, badly need a starting guard for next season. Barton can start there in the NFL if he goes to the Dolphins. And then after that, depending on where holes open up on your offensive line going forward, you have that bullet in your chamber of, we could just switch Graham out there. So I think this is a good fit. And of course, he's super duper athletic as well, something that the Dolphins look for not only with their skill guys, but also with their offensive linemen.
Coming off what we call, I'd most definitely say, a down year after getting bounced in the first round of the playoffs, Ray, Philly is on the clock at number 22. How did they start rebuilding? And I'm guessing it's defense.
Well, you may guess defense, and the right choice should be defense, but it feels like for me, the Eagles are in this very interesting spot right now where they probably need to add some more playmakers. And oh my God, Ray, more playmakers with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley. Hell yeah. My dark horse landing spot for a wide receiver that everybody mocked the Kansas City Chiefs is going to go to Philadelphia right here. As their third receiver in the base formation, 11 personnel, they want to roll out 3 wide receivers the primary amount of times. I think Xavier Worthy to Philadelphia, while the fantasy community probably would absolutely hate it, you add him to that offense, and A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Xavier Worthy can work interchangeably in the 3 wide receiver positions. You talk about the headaches that would pose for opposing defenses, having those 3 guys on the field at the same time. I think Xavier Worthy makes a ton of sense for Philadelphia at this juncture to just say, you know what, screw it. We are going to try to beat you with offense in today's NFL where you can't even touch the offensive guys. You add Xavier Worthy to this offense, it gets scary real quick in Philadelphia. So I'm going X-Worthy off the beaten path here to Philadelphia at 22.
I mean, that's going to be the pick, Thor. How mad would the fantasy community be about this?
They might be mad, but I think I was sort of smiling because there's so much symmetry here with Xavier Worthy, a guy that I comp to Deshaun Jackson, see so much in his game, and for Philly to bring him in, the different stuff that they could do, I think that would evoke that. I think for football fans in general, that would be cool. The fantasy community who wants to see more volume with him, they might get upset. But one thing I would suggest is, as far as the utility of Worthy's game, not that he was misused at Texas, but because Xavier Worthy so easily gets open, it's not only the explosion and obviously set the record for the 40 at the combine. He's a better route runner than people give him credit for. But Quinn Ewers just peppered the guy with targets all the time. I mean, like, we talk about Adonai Mitchell and like how he didn't get, like the targets were down for him. Xavier Worthy was the one who was getting peppered with targets all the time. I would suggest that it's probably a better fit for Xavier Worthy not to be that number one banana who every single play they're peppering with targets. Maybe that would help out some with the slightly elevated drop rate at Texas. My one slight concern about his game, if he's that second, third guy who's zipping around and taking advantage of the spacing he's getting from another alpha receiver or two on his roster, I think that's where things could get scary. So I like that. And the last thing that I'd say, Mr. Mayo, one of the reasons I was smiling about that when Ray was saying it, I hadn't thought about that fit a lot despite my comp, during the past couple months when I've done all these mocks. This morning I woke up and an NFL agent had sent me a mock draft that he had done on the PFF thing. It was like, hey, this is what I did. What are your thoughts on this? This is, some of the stuff from things that he has heard and different stuff like this. And you want my take? And I saw he had Xavier Worthy to the Eagles at 22. And that sort of raised my eyebrow. And I told him some of the same things I just told you about how that would be really cool with Deshaun Jackson and different stuff like that. So I think that is more in play than maybe people are giving it credit for.
Well, this really worked out so perfectly, it's almost like it was planned, but you get to pick for the Minnesota Vikings again, Thor.
This would be such a good scenario for the Vikings. Obviously, they got JJ McCarthy without having to give up more stuff earlier, and now you have two guys that would both be perfect fits for the other side of the ball, helping that out at acute positions of need. So you could almost flip a coin, either Latu from UCLA or Cooper Dejean from Iowa. I am going to go with Cooper Dejean from Iowa because I think he is such a good fit for what Brian Flores traditionally looks for in his defensive backs. The Vikings defensive backfield, specifically the cornerback room, has been very, very bad for a long time. And some people are like, oh, Cooper, he's not a boundary guy. He's a tweener. You might have to put him at safety. You might have to put him at nickel. No, he is a chess piece in the defensive backfield. You can play him on the boundary. You can absolutely play him closer to the ball in the nickel. He is better. Like, people need to see when they send him after the quarterback sometimes. Certainly, you could put him back at safety as well. He is very smart with the field in front of him. The other thing, Iowa would sometimes put him in the loaded boxes when they knew the other team was going to run. And Cooper will run sideline to sideline and hit running backs. He likes doing that as well. He has been on all the Iowa special teams going back several years and is also a fabulous punt returner. I think Brian Flores, this is where he gets hit back after the offensive coaches got their guy in the top and would greatly help out their defensive backfield. So they would love that pick here.
Okay, so Ray, Thor gets Minnesota. You get Dallas with the pick. What are the Cowboys going to do here?
Tears of joy, tears of absolute. Thor, you had me on a panic attack because I thought you were going to take Latu.
I got you.
You had me covered there. I'll just say this. Dallas has significant holes at every level, both sides of the ball. They need a running back. They need offensive line help. They need defensive line help. They need linebacker help. They can use for secondary help. They have needs all in place. And luckily for them, this class is so awesome that there are multiple positions they can go. Need versus BPA. Need Jackson Powers Johnson. They need a center in the worst way. That would be my selection, but Thor left me Laiatu Latu on the board here from UCLA. And if he were here in play for the Dallas Cowboys at 24 with the Micah Parsons contract coming up, DeMarcus Lawrence tank has been a beast for years, but he is long in the tooth. They've got to get after the opposing quarterback. Mike Zimmer is in on a one-year deal, and Thor, you know how wild and crazy Mike Zimmer can be on defense. If the Dallas Cowboys were put in this boat and the choice was between a center and I like Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State, Thor, that they potentially can maybe trade up for in the second round, but you can't pass up the talent of Latu right here. This is a player who, Pat, I believe could be in this class. So for him to fall to 24 at Dallas, even despite the fact that the Cowboys need offensive line, I can't pass Latu up here at pick 24. We'll address offensive line. We'll address linebacker, running back later in the draft. But right here to get a potential top 10 player here at 24, Latu is the pick for the Dallas Cowboys, and I am happy.
Do you think that there is no chance that Jerry looks at this board, Ray, and just says, oh, no running backs have gone? I'll take the best one.
Absolutely. There's a chance they can take a running back. I think it would be egregious if they took a wide receiver here at 24. In no way, shape, or form do I believe the Cowboys should do that. But Jerry Jones is the wild card of all wild cards. So who the hell knows what they will do when it's time to press play. But in Will McClay, I will trust. And if Latu is on the board here, you run to the podium and you smash Latu out of UCLA to the Dallas Cowboys.
Thor, the Packers are going to be everyone's sleeper team, essentially, coming into the year. Oh, look how good they were last year. Overachieved expectations. I always find that these teams tend to take a step back in like the big year that they're supposed to break out. Then everyone gets off and then they're good the next year. So what are they going to do with Jordan Love here? Because they do seem like they're on the precipice of potentially breaking through if they can make some proper decisions in the first few rounds of the draft. So they're picking right now at number 25. What are they going to do?
Yeah, there's been a lot of thought they could help out Jordan Love via help through the offensive line with this pick. The way the board goes, though, the one offensive tackle that we still like that would be absolutely worth this slot is Amarius Mims. He's not really a stylistic fit for what the Packers traditionally look for in their offensive linemen. So I'm going to make the situational assumption to pass on that for them. Then on the other side of the ball, it's the defensive backfield. You like your cornerback one in Alexander. They've been trying to figure out the other guy opposite him. They've tossed some draft equity at him, whether through injuries, whether through struggles. Just hasn't worked out yet. Of that guy to sit there with Alexander every single game in and game out and be a plus guy over there. I think you have better value on the board for what they typically look for in those two buckets at the cornerback position right now. We're going to send Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama to Green Bay and give them that solid second cornerback in there in that room with Jair Alexander.
It's a great name. There's one thing that you can really live on. Even if you do bust, Ray, and you might not be the greatest player. I always call it Travis Outlaw syndrome in the NBA. That the only reason he got a big contract because his last name is Outlaw. It's a cool name, and people thought he was good because his last name was Outlaw. If you have a defined name that people sticks out in your mind, because most cornerbacks, by and large, are generally anonymous, people will think he's good regardless if he's good or not.
Yes. And I think that's part of it, right? If you've got that name, regardless if you're good or not, that name will trump that game in certain situations. So I actually like that pick. Thor, he sniped me quite a bit on this one because I thought the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would definitely take Kool-Aid if he were on the board here with this next pick. But I think we got some heat cooked up for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here at their next selection.
So who are you going to give the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with their selection right here?
Well, I thought wide receiver. I see a lot of Adonai Mitchell here to Tampa Bay, but bringing Mike Evans back, I like what Trey Palmer gave them from an explosive standpoint towards the end of the season. And you still have Chris Godwin. So I think they're fine from that wide receiver standpoint. But one of the big things that impacted Tampa Bay early in last season that wasn't talked about, and they overcome in spite of the fact that Ryan Jensen was injured, center. They could use a center. And I believe that Jackson Powers-Johnson is a Pro Bowl caliber center. So to pair him with Baker Mayfield in what's going to be a new look Tampa Bay offense with Dave Canales taking his talents to the Carolina Panthers, it's going to be interesting to see how this offense operates. But giving Baker Mayfield his center, right? They gave Baker a 3-year deal. You get JPJ there to pair with Wirfs on the left side. I think this could be a very, very competent offensive line and a good offense in 2024. So we're going to go with the big nasty out of Oregon, Jackson Powers-Johnson, to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here at 26.
Yeah, Thor, I think you had him going a whole lot higher in your latest mock draft, didn't you?
Yeah, I like Jackson Powers-Johnson quite a bit, and a guy that also can play both guard spots. We know that because that's what he was doing at Oregon before they converted him over. Can even play some tackle. We've seen him there a bit too in the past. But yeah, regardless of where you want to put him, He was another guy down in Mobile, absolutely proved the concept. That's a guy you do not want to be with in a phone booth. He gets his mitts on you. You're going where he wants you to go. Very, very reliable. And like I said, the versatility as well adds to that value where, typically interior offensive linemen, sometimes they get poo-pooed during the process. Even the really good ones could get filtered into the second round. I think that proven versatility, and obviously what he showed on film and then during this pre-draft process, is what puts Jackson Powers-Johnson in play to go in the first round. And on my board, he is absolutely a first rounder.
When people tell you they know what's going to happen, I think this is kind of the conclusion of that they don't. Arizona has this pick via the Houston Texans. We all, I mean, maybe I'm just talking about myself here, kind of laughed at this trade last year. Like, well, Houston's going to be terrible. Arizona, like, what are you doing? Giving up, like, Houston, what are you doing giving up this pick? And like, oh, they actually kind of had it figured out. When you draft a franchise quarterback and a stud on the defensive side of the ball, things can work out pretty well. So this is not the 5th pick in the draft. It is, Jesus, what is this now? The 27th pick in the draft? I would say that trade worked out pretty well, didn't it, Thor?
Sure did. Yeah, the monster asset that they thought that they were getting turned out to not quite be as good, of course, with Houston getting so good because they facilitated the opportunity for them to take C.J. Stroud, and they chose correctly to use an Indiana Jones when he's in the Temple of Doom. Arizona, will they choose correctly with this pick? I think one area outside of the wide receiver, the obvious one at the top, we've already given them Marvin Harrison Jr. earlier, that they really need to address. It's the defensive front seven. They run a lot of 3-man fronts. They do combo stuff where then they'll go to the 4, but they start out in 3 quite a bit. And their run defense last year was an absolute travesty. With both those things in mind, and with one other piece of context in mind, which is the NFL only invited 12 guys into the green room this year. There was one name on that list that raised everyone's eyebrows a bit. That was Darius Robinson from Missouri. Darius Robinson, a big war daddy type at the edge, a little over 6'5", 285 pounds, 78th percentile athlete, but was awesome at Missouri. Guy that knocks the heads together, the power, the strength of that guy, the range. You can move him inside if you want on passing downs, but the 4-3 fit for him, it's a little more unorthodox, whereas the 3-4-1 is pretty easy. You stick him at the defensive end position there, and then if you want on the passing downs, you could shift him inside certainly, and then the 4-man fronts, do different stuff like that. I think Darius Robinson is absolutely going in the first round because of what he did over the last calendar year, and then what the NFL did and sort of rubber stamping that by inviting him into the green room. I think that this would be a pretty good fit based on what Arizona does and based on what Arizona needs to shore up.
Ray, Buffalo is now back on the clock. They got some work to do. I mean, not back on the clock with their first pick. They had a ton of picks in this draft, though, and they need to make good use of them. They were in cap hell. They shed a lot of that stuff. They get Diggs out to Houston, so they need to rebuild a little bit. I think a lot of people are looking at receiver here. Do you think that's really where they go, though?
No, I don't. I do not believe that's where they go. And again, paying attention to what the teams are telling you. You saw Dalton Kincaid come on strong at the end of the season. They go out, they bring in Curtis Samuel. They trade away Stephon Diggs, and most people just automatically assume just lock and load a wide receiver here to Buffalo. Sure, if Brian Thomas is on the board, which he will not be on the board, yes, Buffalo would probably be interested in taking him. But at this stage, with the wide receivers that are left, I wouldn't feel good if I were Buffalo of those guys coming in and being better than anybody else that they currently have on the roster. So I don't believe that they address that area of the field. There is a defensive player that is still on the board that I think the Buffalo Bills fans would absolutely love and would help that side of the ball out. And I'm talking about Johnny Newton, the defensive tackle from the Illinois Fighting Illini. Johnny Newton is a player, Jer'Zhan Newton, but everyone calls him Johnny Newton. This is a player that can come off of the board at 24 for the Dallas Cowboys who need interior defensive line help. You add this young man to that Buffalo defense, it makes things around him better, pairing him up with Ed Oliver in that rotational defensive line piece right there. Helps out the defensive side of the ball. I do not believe that they're going to go wide receiver here at the back of the first round. I think they either offer offensive line help or D-line help. Johnny Newton, and if you want to kick it over to the offensive side, you still have Jordan Morgan out of Arizona, as well as a player that Thor mentioned, Amarius Mims, the freak athlete monster out of Georgia. That can also be in play, but we're going D-tackle Johnny Newton out of Illinois.
This is going to be a very critical pick coming up next, Thor. 29, the Detroit Lions. They got a lot of guys graduating to big-ass contracts coming up either next year or the year after. They are close. Can they draft someone here that can put them over the top?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. To help out 1000%. And one guy I briefly considered was Mims because of the offensive line, but he doesn't really fit their needs, nor I think the knee biting thing. There's some not concerns, but a guy that only played 8-9 games there at right tackle and is sticking at right tackle. So some of these guys we took earlier, right tackle guys, they could play guard in the NFL. Mims is so huge. I just don't like the stylistic fit as far as that goes. And I thought about Chop Robinson here. I don't love that fit quite as much either. Lions roster has gotten so good. They have fewer holes. I'm going to go outside the box here with another one. I'm going to send McConkey to Detroit. Detroit absolutely needs one more starting receiver. They have, of course, Amon-Ra and they have Jameson Williams, but then it's pray for rain. And of course, you have Laporta there as well, and everything else is coming along well. But Goff could use one other guy that reliably gets open every single down. And I think there's a couple of things that McConkey has been undersold on this process. But the playing on the boundary, I think, would be near the top of that. He played nearly 80% of his snaps on the boundary in college. Two of those teams over the last 3 years won the national title. Last year's one would have had a shot for a three-peat if they hadn't narrowly lost in the SEC title game to Alabama. McConkey came out of that 12 personnel offense that Georgia runs. Wherever you choose to deploy him, he gets separation as easily as you and I breathe. It's just what he does. And then he also has the jets to get downtown. Prove that in Indianapolis with 40 in the high 4.3s. So I think this one on the surface may not make as much sense like for mock drafters in advance, but I actually think it does. I comp Lad McConkey to Jordan Addison, a guy that went in the 20s last year, and I think he's a guy that fits the Lions' prerogative and a guy that would help out Jared Goff in that passing attack quite a bit.
The Ravens. We saw a revitalization of this offense last year. You know, Lamar ends up winning MVP, and then it stalls again against the Chiefs in the playoffs. I mean, it's one game. They got to the AFC Championship game. It's not like it was a terrible year. But what do you think that the Ravens can do in this spot to get them over the hump finally?
I think that is a key point, Pat, that we cannot forget is they did make it all the way almost to the Super Bowl, but it was very evident that they need more playmakers for Lamar Jackson. And I think the addition of Derrick Henry will undoubtedly help come playoff time, but they still need more weapons for Lamar. And if you look at the Ravens roster right now, they only have like one wide receiver currently on their roster legitimately. It's Zay Flowers, Tylan Wallace, Rashad Bateman, Sean Ryan, Deontay Hardy, and Nelson Aguilar. That is all they have on their roster from a wide receiver standpoint right now. And Thor actually sniped me with Lad McConkey because I had him written down. He was going to Baltimore, but no Lad McConkey. And this is a very polarizing player because the physical attributes for this player, they scream top 15 pick. But you turn on the film, you look at the tape, and there's some inconsistencies to his game. But I'm going to trust the Harbaugh family. I'm going to trust Todd Monken, and more importantly, I'm going to trust the reigning MVP Lamar Jackson to get the absolute most out of Texas wide receiver Adonai Mitchell. And while he may not be everyone's favorite cup of tea, what he is he brings something different to this Baltimore offense. They've just got a bunch of small guys out there running around for Lamar Jackson. You put Adonai out there, I don't think he's the number one or even number two target in that Baltimore offense, but you'll have to respect the speed. He's got the size, and he presents another red zone option for Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and the Baltimore Ravens. You can also look at the defensive side of the ball. Marlon Humphrey's inability to stay healthy last season makes me kind of think about defensive back help, but maybe a little too early for TJ Tampa right here out of Iowa State. So I'm going to go with Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver out of Texas, to Baltimore here at 30.
The Super Bowl losers are up next, Thor, and it looks like they're trying to potentially move on from the big deal that Brandon Ayuk is going to get. Is this a wide receiver spot? What do you think they end up doing here? Because it seems like they have a ton of options.
Yeah, with San Fran here, their offensive line, I think, is going to be near the top there. We'll have to see how it works out with the receivers. There's been the rumors, and then with the Ayuk camp had to respond to them. We'll see how that ends up going up. But I think the thing that they would probably lean towards in this first round, if they had their druthers, Day two is where it's going to be stacked in receivers. So if those are the two buckets that you're looking for, you might sort of the split decision might be won by the offensive line here at the end of the first round. I mean, just speaking to that on my board, Ricky Pearsall, Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson, Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette, Javon Baker are all top 60 prospects that are still on the board. So that would be, potential round two stuff as far as that goes. With this pick here, keeping in mind the offensive line stuff, Amarius Mims still being out there, but maybe not the a lot of times with this pick, it's like Jordan Morgan or Kingsley Suamataia or one of those different guys. Mims isn't traditionally what you might think of in that type of Shanahan offense, different stuff like that. But the talent at this point, if he falls down to here, I think you just have to roll the dice and say, bring this kid in. It is such that it screams for that. The film that we did get on that kid was fabulous against some really good competition when he was at Georgia. The athleticism is great. He's a good kid, a smart kid. People, when you talk to him about him as a teammate, they rave about him as far as that stuff goes as well. So I think the juice is worth the squeeze here. Amarius Mims is 22 on my board. He's even higher on some other people's. I think the value would scream it. So that's what we're going to do with this pick.
Ray, the final pick comes down to you. The Kansas City Chiefs, it did seem at the beginning of draft season this would most definitely end up being a receiver, and still might be, depending on what happens with Rashee Rice right now. But they did sign Hollywood Brown, bring him in with the last pick to get that, you have that extra. The 5 years is very valuable as a part of this pick, depending on who you take. Who are the Chiefs going to take?
Oh, let's go through what everybody thinks, right? Wide receiver. Outside of Pearsall, Roman Wilson, who I'm very high on as well, I'm not sure that Kansas City goes the wide receiver route in the first round here. Let's not forget that they did just lose L'Jarius Sneed as well, who was shipped off to Tennessee. You look at that defensive backfield, the offensive line could all be addressed by the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to throw a name out there that a lot of casuals may not know. It's a defensive player. But Ennis Rakestraw out of Missouri, I mean, this young man can go out there and play lockdown cornerback. They already have one of the best corners in Trent McDuffie in the NFL playing on one side of the ball. And we've seen Kansas City sort of have this propensity not to pay their superstar players. So I'm hoping and fingers crossed that they lock McDuffie up long term when that comes. But they've done a very good job of buying and building in depth and backup options. I think Ennis Rakestraw, TJ Tampa are two available options for Kansas City here at 32 to take. But the Rakestraw's fluidity, the way that he sinks his hips, the way that he breaks and bursts out of that back pedal to explode, to close the gap between he and wide receiver, it's special. And I think this young man, what he was able to do in the SEC would be an excellent fit in this defense with everything that Spagnuolo likes to move around and do. I think Ennis Rakestraw out of Missouri would be the selection here for Kansas City at 32. Not everyone's favorite wide receiver, not here, not at this spot.
And one other thing to that, Ray, one other thing Kansas City's shown a propensity to do, last process, their surprise first round pick that wasn't being projected in advance, the Felix, I'm still not great with the last name, but the edge rusher, local kid. And they talked about this right after that at the press conference, everything, how they had the exposure on him because he played at nearby Manhattan, Kansas. Ennis Rakestraw plays at nearby Columbia, Missouri, which they're about equidistant from Kansas City. That administration has a lot of exposure on Ennis Rakestraw Jr. So it could evoke that pick last year as well, bringing the local kid over. And not a terrible, certainly value here either for a guy that would clearly be top on the cornerback list, a top 40 prospect on my board as well.
I do have to throw a bone to the fantasy football community here, Ray. Destination Devy, if you're looking for dynasty stuff, all this prospect breakdown from Ray and crew, both on YouTube and, just follow them at RayGQ on Twitter. You have the whole link tree of everything that's up there to find exactly what you need from Ray. But when's the first running back going to go?
Gosh, first running back's not going to come off of the board to probably middle of the second round. Historically, you just don't see number one running backs come off the board past round two. So I think the first one's going to come off somewhere mid round two. And I think we may get a couple of more that people are expecting in that round 2 to round 3 range. But mid round 2 is when I'm projecting the first running back to come off of the board.
Who are the best ones, Thor, that you think can make an impact in the NFL?
Trey Benson, I think would be my leader in the clubhouse to be that RB1, and Dallas in round 2. I'm pretty sure they have their round 2 pick. Would be my leader in the clubhouse to do that. Yeah, you mentioned the need beforehand there, but yeah, Trey Benson has all the physical tools to come in immediately. The athleticism was crazy. Tested as one of the best ones there, and then 2 years ago in 2022 at FSU, he broke PFF's charting record for forced missed tackle rate. The first guy ever in a collegiate season at the FBS level at that position to have more than 50% in that. So he has that ability to break the tackle through the whole early second level, and then he has the jets after that. He also has a really hard cut to force off angle attempts as opposed to the square ones, and you're not taking that guy down unless you have the square attempt. Big fortified kid who, when he gets that head of steam, he becomes a problem going downhill, the speed to power stuff. Another one I would toss out is Jalen Wright from Tennessee. We got to see him more last year. He doesn't have as many touches as some of these other guys, or some of the injury concerns of some of these other guys. Also gives you two-way utility. You have both the sort of like a Tevin Coleman thing as a runner, where he's looking for the straight line crease, and then he has the crazy jets, the 4.3 speed as well on right. But then he's also has shown to be a solid receiver and an underrated pass blocker. So there's, he needs to work. He played at a Mickey Mouse offense at Tennessee. You're going to need to work him in. But I think he has a ton of talent. And then the last guy, of course, is Jonathan Brooks, who had the awesome 10-game stretch at the start of the season for Texas last year. Unfortunately suffered the ACL, which is the only sort of haziness with his eval. We don't exactly know what the NFL medical staffs, what they thought of that coming out of it and what the timeline is. You would assume he'd be ready for training camp, but that's one thing you'll have to keep an eye on. And of course, he wasn't able to submit an athletic testing profile because of that.
Ray, I'll throw it to you with wide receivers and tight ends. Who should we be looking for day 2, day 3 to have an interesting landing spot for fantasy purposes?
Oh, man, there's a couple, and we kind of touched on a few of these names a few minutes ago, but I want to start with Roman Wilson out of Michigan. We were giving the love to J.J. McCarthy earlier. You look at who he was finding open down the field, having that chemistry with. It's Roman Wilson. It's one of the things that Thor talks about quite a bit with J. Roman Wilson's counting stats, when you look at the number, it is not a byproduct of him being an inferior talent. It's the scheme, and that's how college football works. Scheme over players, over teams, and that's a story as true as time. Thor, you can go back and look at the Tim Tebow, Chris Leak days. They do what works for those offenses, and that's what Michigan did. So when you look at a player like Roman Wilson, who never had a 1,000-yard season, he wasn't having 1,500 yards, look at the route diversity in which he operated in that offense, and you saw it day one down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. He was uncoverable, as well as Florida wide receiver Ricky Pearsall. These are two players who I believe they're fit. Roman Wilson, I think he's got a little more positional flexibility than Pearsall, but Pearsall's hands, I don't say this lightly, he may have the stickiest hands of anybody in this class. And I am not just saying that as conjecture. He has overall just hands in this class. Those are two players that should come off of the board early in day 2. And Thor, they may even sneak into round 1 of the NFL draft. I think Xavier Legette out of South Carolina, I know a lot of people are talking about, well, he didn't produce until his senior year. I'm not going to go through his entire career arc and his story and the positions that he played going into South Carolina and what happened at an awful program of what was going on in South Carolina. But this young man's physical tools, traits, and talent scream stud wide receiver at the next level. So if I had to peg 3 more guys that I am just very excited about from the high end, it's Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette, and do not sleep on Virginia wide receiver Malik Washington. Remember the name Malik Washington, who is probably going to be drafted much higher than people expect and have an impact on whatever franchise drafts him.
Well, that will do it. Year number 5 of the Pat Mayo Experience, final mock draft. Thor, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Bettingpros.com, fantasypros.com. Do you have any extra special content happening, dropping maybe on draft day or maybe even the day after, or you wait until next week to do the reviews?
Yeah, you can check out the also the big board, 500 player big board we drop with 500 player comps is out right now. And then Pat, on draft day this year, we're doing a live day 1 show on Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. And then also a live day 2 show for anyone out there if you want to toss us up on a second screen, and certainly check in on me after the Vikings, their quarterback pick there in the first round, because if they find a way to not get, if it's not JJ, I could be in I could be in some tough straits at that point.
Ray, do you have any extra content coming out, or is it just go to Destination Devi, which you give Jordan shit for me as much as you can? And are you doing a live? Are you doing a live pre, post, during, over the weekend? I'm always curious about this stuff because I'm not. So I'm going to push everyone towards you guys.
Yeah, we are going live. This will be the 4th year that we've gone live at Destination Devi, presented by Underdog Fantasy. So they will be sponsoring that live stream. We will be going live day 1. Day 2, and you know what, Pat? We take you all the way through the whole damn thing. All of day 3, where everybody taps out, we will be going live all 3 days. So while you've got Fantasy Pros with Derek and Thor and the rest of the crew, make sure you have Destination Devi pulled up. It's going to be a phenomenal place. We've got giveaways, prizes, live fantasy analysis. You know, Jay Rich and I, we do Wake Up on Monday, so that'll be a monster show after the draft. And then, just doing everything that we do to just try to inform people. And here's the thing, for Thor, for myself, for what we do, once the draft concludes for 2024, we're already looking ahead to that 2025 class. And I'm telling everybody right now, Pat, it's going to be a good one. It's going to be a fun one. There are running backs. There are more quarterbacks than people think. And there's some definite stud wide receivers. So we're just excited to continue to do this. And thank you for having me on this show. I absolutely love being here with you every single year.
Well, I hope all of you out there either watching or listening love it too. If you do, smash a like, sub to the audio podcast for the Pat Mayo Experience on Apple and Spotify. Always kind to leave a 5-star review after you subscribe, and do that as well. Underdog Fantasy code Mayo and runthesims.com/Mayo to get yourself 10% off. Thank you all for watching. Sub to the free newsletter that is down in the description if you want a cheat sheet version of all of the picks that we went through on the show, plus time codes to go along with it too. And I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!